Hey everyone, on this lecture we are going to study functions with multiple results in Lua. So a quite convenient feature of Lua is that functions can return multiple results. For instance, suppose this situation, we have a sequence and we want to find the maximum value of this sequence and also the location, the index where this takes place, where the maximum is. So I have this sequence S, suppose that the maximum value, okay, happens in here. So I don't only want to return this value of the maximum, but also we want to return the index where this maximum takes place. So we also want this index here, okay, to return the position where this maximum is. Remember that in Lua, indices start from 1. So let's define this function. We can define this function very easily. First of all, let's create a new file. Let's here save this file and let's name it with maximum.lua. Here we're using Kate editor. You can use any editor that you are used to. So remember the function syntax. First of all, we have the function keyword, then we have the name of this function. Let's name this function maximum. It is going to receive an argument s, okay, only one parameter s, which is the sequence. And so here, what is the approach that we are going to do in order to find the maximum? Well, if we have a list, if we have an array, if we have a sequence, and we want to find the maximum of this sequence, a common approach in computer science and in programming is to say, okay, initially I'm going to suppose that the maximum is in the first position, so the index of the maximum is going to be 1, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to traverse all of the elements, so I'm going to check this element, then I'm going to check this element, and so on, check this element, and so for each new element that is greater than the previous maximum, so that exceeds the maximum, we are going to update the maximum. So, for instance, suppose that we say that this maximum here, okay, is the first index. And suppose that we have the value 3 in here. And then we here do this loop. We go to the next position. Here we have a 2. We need to evaluate. Is the value 2 less than the actual maximum? No, it is not. We continue. Or in this case, is it greater than the actual maximum? No. So we continue. Now we go to the next position, the next value. Suppose here we have a 5. So what happens? We do the evaluation. Is 5 greater than the actual maximum? Yes. So in that case, we update the value of the maximum to be 5 and the index to be this index in here, right? And so this is going to be done iterative and a iterative way in all of the sequence. So this is the approach that we are going to follow. So following what we have discussed, let's define initially that the maximum index is 1. Initially, we say that the maximum index is the position 1. And the maximum, let's call this maximum m, to be the value inside this index in here, right? The value inside this max index. So we have here a function and we are going to work with local variables in here. It is already a good approach and a good practice to start implementing the scope of variables and defining their scope in Lua, okay? Most of the times that we declare and we work with variables, we define their scope. So since we only want to use these variables inside this function, these are going to be local variables. This is local variable max index, this is the local variable m. And so right now we are at the position 1, right? So what we need to do is we need to traverse all of the sequence. We need to traverse all of the elements of this sequence. However, notice how the first element is already checked. We already know the value of the first index. We also know the index, right? So we don't need to come again here because the actual maximum is this value. We don't need to compare this value with this same value. So we are going to basically start from the index 2 and we are going to traverse all of the remaining sequence. So we can traverse a sequence with the for loop. Whenever we want to traverse a list or an array in Lua, we can do this with a for loop. And so now from the iterative variable I to be equal to 2 until we reach the size of the sequence, the length of the sequence, then what we're going to do. So just here, bear in mind that what this is doing is, this is basically a for loop. We are going to repeat this for loop many times. We haven't yet arrived to the for loop section, but just a for loop is a control structure that allows us to repeat a block of code, okay, a specific number of times or iterate over a sequence of elements. We have an initialization, which is this part. Then we have the condition to be inside the loop. So in this case, we are going to be inside the loop until the value of I reaches the length of s. At each iteration, if we don't specify other thing, it is going to be incremented in 1 unit. And so right now inside this for loop, we have the index that we want to compare with the maximum value. So essentially here we are going to do an if conditional structure, and we are going to check if the value, okay, of the sequence S in this position I, in this index I, is greater than the actual maximum M, then what do we need to do? Well, it is very logic here. If we have found the new maximum, we need to update the actual maximum and the actual index of the maximum. So we update the maximum to be this value, and we update the maximum index to be precisely this index. Whenever we have a control structure, regarding if it is a conditional structure or a iterative structure, we need to end this structure with the end. So here we end this if with the end in here, and then we end the for with this end in here, like this. So now at the end of this for loop, we have traversed all of the elements, and this variable max index contains the value of the index where the maximum takes place, and this variable then contains the value of the maximum. Okay, the last thing that we need to do in this function is basically to return the maximum and the index, and this is how we return multiple results. In Lua, to return multiple results, we just separate them with commas, like this. So here we return maximum and its index. Very well, so to end this function, we just type here end. With this, we end this function definition. And with this, we have the maximum defined. It is a function that, given a sequence, it returns the maximum of this sequence and also the maximum index. You know, here, notice how we haven't yet reached to the control structure section, the for loop, the conditional if, but we already have an idea of how these structures work. That's why in programming, the most important thing is to learn by practicing. This when we program, when we learn by practicing those examples, those problems, when we actually learn how all of this is working. So once we have saved this file, now we open the terminal of our operating system, we open the console, we need to place ourselves in the same directory where we have this file. So now we can open the Lua interpreter, and now let's load this maximum file. So the name of this file is maximum.lua, we load it, and now let's test this. Let's suppose here we have a sequence S. Okay, the sequence is, for instance, 8, 10, 25. Then we also have here 16, and then we have 9. So suppose we have this sequence. Okay, this is the sequence S. So let's now find the maximum of this sequence and also where it takes place. So we just pass S as an argument. We press the enter key. And so precisely this gives us the maximum is 25, as we can see, and the index is 3. Right, this happens in position 3, 1, 2, and 3. Right, so the program is working right. We can also check with another sequence. Imagine the sequence A. We have 100, we have 2, we have 4, we have 200, then we have 7, we have 1011, and then we have 9 and 5. If I have this sequence A, and now I try to find the maximum of this sequence and also where it takes place, we press the enter key. As we can see precisely, the maximum is 1011. Okay, and this takes place at the position 6. Very well, with this is how we return multiple results in functions. We basically separate the results with a comma. So we can visualize some more simple examples of functions with multiple results. First of all, let's suppose that we have a function here f that doesn't return anything. Basically, it is a function that does nothing. Then we have a function that only returns one argument. Let's call it f1. Okay, here it is going to return the string a, and we're going to, and then finally we have a function f2 that returns 2 arguments. Okay, or in this case 2 results. It returns the result a, and also it returns the result b, and it ends. Now Lua always adjusts the number of results from a function to the circumstances of the call. So for instance, let's go to the interpreter. Let's update the new code that we have added. So again, we need to use the do file. The name is maximum.lua. We update the code. And remember that we have the function f2 that returns a and b. So now if we have x and y here, if we have 2 variables, x and y, and we set this to be equal to f2, then what is going to happen is x is going to take the value of a, y is going to take the value of b. This is known as a multiple assignment. So let's verify. We run. If we just type x, this is a. If we type y, this is b. Now, what if we have a function with multiple results and we only have one resulting assignment? For instance, imagine that we have z is equal to f2. In that case, we are going to take the first result that we are returning. So in this case, A is going to have the value, okay, Z is going to have the value of A, and B will be discarded. As we can see, Z only has A. We can also have a mixed multiple assignment. So suppose here that we have X, Y, and Z. We have three variables, X, Y, and Z. And we set those values to be equal to 10, and then the function f2. What is going to happen in this case? Well, X is going to contain the value 10, Y the value A, Z the value B. So let's verify. If we type X, we see 10. If we type Y, we see A. If we type Z, we see B. Very well. Remember that we also had the functions f that basically doesn't return anything, and the function f1 that only returns A. So now what happens if we try to set to the values x, y the value of f? So of course f is a function that doesn't return anything. So what is going to happen is that x, y are going to be nils. So if I type, first of all, let's load this file, do file maximum.lua. Now x, y is equal to f. Okay, then the values of x, y are going to be nils. Let's verify. If we type x, nil. If we type y, is nil. Now if we use the function f1, okay, f1 in this assignment x, y, since f1 only returns one value, which is a, the value of x is going to contain a, but the value of y is going to be nil. Now if we type x, this is a. If we type y, is this nil. Very well. So now let's study the last example here with the function f2. Now if we have this multiple assignment x, y, and z, and we set this to be equal to f2, since f2 only returns two values, then x and y are going to contain the values a and b, but z will be nil. If we run, we have x, which is a, we have y, which is b, we have z, which is nil, which is of course the expected behavior. Very well, with this we end this lecture. On the following lectures, we are going to continue to see these functions with multiple results. We remind the student that you can download this code that we have used on the downloadable documents of this lecture.